Survivors of psychological abuse consistently report the exact same experience at the very beginning of the relationship, an overwhelming, immediate sensation of feeling perfectly understood and seen for the first time in their lives. You project your raw emotions, your fears, and your hopes, and another person flawlessly reflects them right back to you. Yet clinical data presents a paradox. This flawless, intense reflection is frequently executed by individuals who are clinically defined by their profound inability to feel empathy. This initial connection is not genuine romance. It is not a serendipitous encounter with a soulmate. It is a deliberate, predatory psychological exploit. It operates exactly like a form of clinical identity theft. Master manipulators, psychopaths, narcissists, and a category known as dark empaths do not actually connect with their targets. They execute a precise cognitive hack. To knot your deepest vulnerabilities, these individuals exploit a unique structural imbalance in their own neurological empathy systems. The objective of this exploit is entirely biological, to hijack your brain chemistry and take control of your dopamine reward circuitry. Surviving this form of psychological abuse requires a shift in perspective. You must stop analyzing the relationship as a failed romance and begin treating it as a successful breach of your neurological hardware. To understand how this hack works, we have to recognize that human empathy is not a single, monolithic emotional trait. This diagram illustrates what psychologists call the empathy bifurcation. Empathy is actually driven by two separate, distinct biological hardware systems in the brain. On the left is affective empathy. This is the biological contagion of actually feeling another person's emotional state. When you see someone in pain and feel a pang in your own chest, that is affective empathy, functioning as the brain's natural mechanism for moral inhibition. On the right is cognitive empathy. This is the purely intellectual capacity to read, calculate, and accurately map another person's mental state. It requires zero emotional contagion. You understand what the person is feeling, but you do not feel it yourself. This distinction is critical when examining the dark triad, psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism, as well as the emerging classification of the dark empath. Recent clinical data reveals the specific neurological configuration found in these dark personalities. They possess a near-total deficit in affective empathy. They feel no visceral moral friction when causing harm to others, because they do not absorb the emotional impact of their actions. But their cognitive empathy remains entirely intact, and in many cases is highly superior. They can clinically read emotions and vulnerabilities with razor-sharp precision, without being burdened by the feelings themselves. This specific hardware imbalance, high cognitive calculation paired with zero affective inhibition, creates an apex social predator uniquely equipped to weaponize human connection. The first phase of the narcissistic abuse cycle is clinically referred to as idealization, commonly known as love bombing. Despite the name, this intense early phase is not driven by the abuser's sudden infatuation or a sudden capacity for genuine love. Love bombing is a high-speed, highly strategic intelligence-gathering operation. It relies entirely on a process called cognitive mapping. Using their high cognitive empathy, the abuser extracts and categorizes your deepest values, your insecurities, and your unmet psychological needs. They then synthesize this extracted data to project a flawless mirage. They artificially construct a persona specifically tailored to be your perfect partner. This mirage has a profound internal impact on your brain chemistry. Encountering what appears to be a flawless, frictionless human connection triggers a massive, unnatural release of dopamine and endorphins in your neural pathways. This dopamine flood tricks your brain's reward circuitry. It biochemically links the abuser to your fundamental mechanisms for survival and pleasure. The profound soulmate connection you feel during this phase is entirely synthetic. You are unwittingly addicting your own brain to a reflection of yourself. The true nature of the cognitive hack reveals itself at the crucial pivot point, the exact moment the abuser abruptly drops the perfect mirror. This chart shows the clinical cycle of narcissistic abuse. Moving past the idealization phase, Synthetic affection is suddenly replaced by cruelty, rejection, and the silent treatment in the devalue stage. As your perceived soulmate turns hostile, you experience severe psychological whiplash. A severe neurological crash follows. Your dopamine levels plummet and are immediately replaced by overwhelming spikes of the stress hormone cortisol. This leads to the insidious psychological mechanism that traps victims in the relationship, known as intermittent reinforcement. The abuser does not remain permanently cruel. Instead, they sporadically and unpredictably reinstate bursts of the original affection, a tactic clinically referred to as hoovering. Neuroscience describes this as the slot machine effect. Dopamine flows significantly more heavily in the brain when a reward is unpredictable rather than consistent. When the abuser hoovers you amidst the stress of devaluation, the result is a dangerous, unnatural biochemical high. This specific cycle, severe cortisol-induced stress, followed by massive random dopamine rewards, hardwires you into a trauma bond. It transforms a romantic relationship into a clinical addiction that completely overrides logical thought. Trying to apply logic to a trauma bond is futile. The bond bypasses logic entirely because it operates strictly on the level of a hardwired biochemical addiction. Victims suffer intense cognitive dissonance, endlessly trying to reconcile the perfect mirage of the idealization phase with the cruel reality of the devaluation phase. But the clinical truth is entirely structural. The deep affection you experienced was never real. It was weaponized cognitive empathy. The abuser is a puppeteer, pulling the strings of your emotional hardware to extract compliance and narcissistic supply. You are looking at a reflection engineered to control you. The clinical path forward for victims begins with radical acceptance. You must recognize that the relationship was a systematic neurological hack, not a shared reality. To break the bond, you must actively stop seeking the artificial dopamine spikes provided by the abuser's intermittent reinforcement. Breaking a trauma bond requires accepting the void. You must cut the strings, endure the withdrawal, and walk away from the mirror.